Over here, please. Madame.
Ja, ich würde bitten, die Fotografen, wenn Sie jetzt...
Madame.
Bitte schön. Asseyez-vous maintenant, sitzen Sie bitte. Die Fotografen, bitte sitzen Sie. Wir wurden diese Pressekonferenz in Französisch machen, deswegen haben Sie die Übersetzung. Bitte, die Fotografen, können Sie Platz nehmen jetzt.
Would the photographers please be so kind as to sit down and calm down?
S'il vous plaît, est-ce qu'on peut arrêter? Veuillez prendre place, veuillez vous asseoir, s'il vous plaît. Bien, d'abord, j'aimerais exprimer notre joie à nous tous.
First of all, I'd like to say how very delighted we are all to have Kathleen Deneuve with us here this evening.
De donner votre temps à la presse et aux différentes questions.
And I'd like to thank you in advance for offering up your time to the press to ask any questions you may have. Mr. Wolfgang Jakobsen is here with us as well to give me a hand. This is the gentleman who prepared the retrospective. He's a member of the German Cinematheque here in Berlin, so please raise your hand and wait for the microphone before asking your question so you can be translated. Please speak into a microphone.
Alors, les questions, s'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît. Est-ce qu'on peut arrêter un petit moment les flashs? On ne voit plus rien. Voilà.
Could we stop the flashes for a moment? No more photographs. Questions, please, into a microphone.
Bonsoir, Catherine Deneuve.
Asseyez-vous, s'il vous plaît.
Je me suis amusée à un petit jeu
Good
à
evening.
Berlin.
I've been engaging in a small
J'ai
game
demandé à
in
tous
Berlin.
les Allemands que je rencontrais,
I asked
les
all the
étrangers,
Germans I met, all the foreigners I
Catherine
met,
Deneuve, pour vous, qui est-elle?
what does Catherine
C'est très
Deneuve mean to you?
amusant
Who is she?
de s'apercevoir que
It's very
vous avez
interesting
plusieurs
to
images.
note that
Alors, il y a
people
ceux
have
qui
different
aiment la
images
Deneuve
of
de
you.
Polanski,
Some love the Deneuve of Polanski, some love Buñuel's
de la
Deneuve,
sirène du Mississippi,
some love the
etc.
Deneuve who was in the
Ma question, c'est
Siren of Mississippi.
dans laquelle des Deneuve vous retrouvez-vous le mieux?
Might I ask which Deneuve you think best fits your image of yourself?
En vérité, je ne crois pas que je me retrouve.
Well.
Je me retrouve pas dans les personnages des films complètement.
I don't think that I
Mais je pense
entirely
qu'il y a,
find myself in the
il y a une
characters
partie de moi
in the
dans-
films.
évidemment, dans
However,
chacun
I
des
would say that of course
personnages.
there is a part of me in each and every
Ça
one
me serait
of
très
those
difficile de
characters.
choisir parce que vous avez
It would be
choisi
very
des films
difficult for me
qui
to
me sont
choose.
particulièrement
You've
chers
selected films
et,
which are particularly dear to my heart.
des films auxquels, oui, j'ai sans doute pu m'identifier peut-être plus que d'autres.
And films
Euh,
in which perhaps I can identify with more
mais
than
je
I
pense
can
que
with
c'est-
other
je
films.
pense que c'est vrai pour toutes les actrices et les
I think that
acteurs
goes
au bout
actually
d'un certain
for all
nombre d'années,
actors
c'est
and
que
actresses
il y
after a
a-
number of years have gone by.
Même quand on essaye de faire un personnage, de créer un personnage, il y a toujours beaucoup plus
Each and
de
every
choix
time
qu'on ne le
that you
voudrait
try
dans
to create
dans
a
une
character,
interprétation.
there's much more of yourself than you might perhaps desire in an interpretation of a particular character.
Question.
Your
Another
films
question.
mark particular periods in your life, and I wondered what the film that we're going to see tonight meant for you at the time you made it, Repulsion. So could you talk a little bit about that period of your life when you made Repulsion and what it means for you?
Répulsion est un film très important pour moi parce que
Repulsion
c'est
was
le
a very
premier film que
important
j'ai
film
fait
for
après les
me.
Parapluies de Cherbourg, qui
It's the
était
first film I
une-
made after the Umbrellas
un
of
film,
Cherbourg.
entièrement chanté,
That was a film which was a
musical.
musical film,
C'est-
entirely in
c'est
song.
aussi le premier film en langue anglaise que j'ai fait avec Roman Polanski.
And it's also
qui faisait,
the first film
ses
I made
débuts en
in the English
Angleterre,
language.
donc,
Roman Polanski
j'avais
started
l'impression-
out in,
nous avions
in
l'impression
the
d'être
UK.
deux étrangers un peu à
So
Londres.
we had the
D'ailleurs,
impression that we were
toute
two
l'équipe était
foreigners
anglaise,
in London. The whole
mais
of the
tous
team
les deux, nous nous
were English.
exprimions en français, ce qui
But we
créait
too
plus
both spoke
d'intimité, plus de
French, which
complicité entre
meant
nous.
that there was more
C'est
intimacy
très
and more
important pour moi
complicity
d'avoir
between
connu
us.
Roman Polanski
It was
comme
very
metteur en
important for
scène
me
très
to
jeune.
have known Roman
Je ne
Polanski
sais
as
pas
a
si
young
plus tard, j'aurais
director.
pu, c'est un
I don't
metteur en scène
know
très, très directif,
whether later on I could have worked with him. He's very authoritarian almost. I don't know if a few years later I could have worked so well together with him and met his requirements so well. I was very young at the time. I was very open, very flexible at that juncture. I have very good memories and very strong memories of Repulsion. It's a film which still impresses me and moves me.
Yes, you're still very much a working actress. I was wondering what you're actually going to do next and what it's like still carrying on.
Oui, je suis toujours une actrice en
Oh yes,
action.
I am still an actress who's hard at work.
J'ai fini un film il y a quelques mois.
I completed a film with Nicole Garcia a few months ago. That came out at the end of the summer, and I was also in the film of Leo Scarra. It's still being shot, and I'll be shooting a film as well at the end of spring. So I think I'm very fortunate, in fact. You're very talented too, are you not? Well, yes, but you know, in both the cinema and the theatre, talent doesn't necessarily equate with success, unfortunately.
Hello. Since Roman Polanski lives in Paris, I was wondering if there has ever been a possibility for you to work with him again, and especially now that he's making American films again. And also, could you tell us a little bit more about the Leos Carax project and what it's like to work with a younger director and with Guillaume Depardieu also, since you know his father rather well?
Roman vit à Paris, enfin vit en France et à Paris.
Roman Polanski lives in France, in Paris, but he works above all with foreign actors and actresses. So we meet from time to time. We bump into each other. I'm very fond of him. He doesn't really change very much. That's rather surprising. But he's a director who doesn't work very much with French actors and actresses. I don't really know why. Although he does live in France, it seems to me that he's not French. He's always going to be a foreigner everywhere he goes, I think, Roman. So I don't think it's very likely that we're going to be working together. The second part of your question, what was it? Oh yes, you asked about Leos Carax. It's hard to talk about the project because I'd like to comply with his desire to keep things secret. Mr. Carax thinks that a film is very difficult to make, so it's important that people maintain a degree of curiosity before the film comes out, which is hard to do. So he doesn't want to have the film talked about too much. I was very pleased to work with him. I admire him very much. He's a real filmmaker. He's not just a director. He's somebody who really lives for the cinema and all which that entails. So I was delighted to work together with him. It's true that he's rather secretive. He's a bit shy. But he's very precise. He comes up with great scenes. Working with younger directors or younger actors has never been a problem for me. It's not something new for me either, actually. In fact, increasingly I find myself working with people who are younger than me, so I'm trying to get used to it. Guillaume, well, I've known him for a long time, a very long time. I know his father very well. I made films with him a long time ago. Guillaume, I think the fact that I'm involved in the film, in a sense, reassures him a bit. I'm not his mother, of course, but I'm acting his mother in the film, and I think that I was quite reassuring for him. He's a very sensitive young man, very fragile, vulnerable. He has an incredible presence. He's got a great deal of potential and a great presence on screen. I mean, it's not as if he were my son. He's a young actor, but it's true that I've known him since he was 12 years old. So, of course, we have a more natural relationship with each other than we might otherwise. You mentioned the umbrellas of Cherbourg before. You come from an artistic family. You worked with your sister, Françoise. Do you sometimes think back to Françoise and...
Ah, d'accord.
Oh, do you remember on Françoise?
Better if you do it in English, thank you.
Ja, und die zweite ist, you have wonderful children. Ja, and sind Sie stolz auf sie?
Are you proud of your children?
Est-ce que vous êtes fier de vos enfants?
Est-ce que
Vous êtes fier de vos enfants? Quelle mère ne serait pas fière de ses enfants?
Mais si je vous disais que j'avais honte de mes enfants, qu'est-ce que vous pensez?
Well, what would you think of me if I said I were ashamed of my children, you know? You would think I'm not only an actress, I'm not a proper mother. Of course I'm proud of my children. I mean, your question's a fairly straightforward question. The answer is quite straightforward too. I'm proud of my children. They're good children. Nice and good children. Another question.
Madame Deneuve, bonsoir. Bon, on vous rend hommage ici à Berlin aujourd'hui.
Homage is being paid to you here in Berlin today.
Faire un bilan. Est-ce qu'il y a des
Perhaps
choses
it's time to take
par
stock.
rapport-
Oh no,
Non, mais
please
est-ce qu'il y a
don't,
des
says Ms.
choses quand
Deneuve.
vous regardez en arrière dont vous
But
êtes particulièrement
are there
fière?
things which you're
Est-ce qu'il y a
especially
des
proud
choses
of
que
looking
vous
back over your
regrettez?
career? Are there
D'abord,
things
est-ce que
which
c'est
you
bien d'avoir
regret?
une vie d'actrice?
Do you enjoy being an actress, living as an actress? Well, this is a tricky question. It's a bit like the question, are you happy? Well, I'm happy sometimes. And I enjoy being an actress. It's a rich, full life. We meet a lot of people. I think, in a sense, I lead a rather privileged existence. And of course, there's some films I like better than others, I enjoyed more than others. Some of the things I regret, but I'm not going to perhaps spill the beans and tell you what I regret. I don't really think that press conferences should be a confessional, even when it comes to professional matters. I think the idea here is to discuss, to say what we want to talk about, what we wish to talk about. And this is one question which I'm not so keen to answer, regrets, professional or otherwise. You talked about taking stock. No, that's not really my cup of tea. I don't really like that. It never has been something I've particularly enjoyed doing. And I don't think I'm ever really going to get into it. The tribute this evening, by the way, is not a tribute to someone who has concluded their career. Well, taking stock doesn't mean you've come to the end of your career, but it means you stop, you look back, you judge, you evaluate. First of all, I don't want to judge. It's not really up to me to judge on what I've done and what I'm doing now. I'm someone who's rather easily frightened. Perhaps I would stop straight away. So I wish to continue doing the things I want to do and continuing to make headway.
Oui, d'accord.
Madame Deneuve, bonjour. S'il vous plaît, quelle est votre impression du cinéma français?
What's your impression of contemporary French cinema? A lot of films are being made. What are these films like? You really mean that? You don't get French films on German screens?
Je veux dire, cette année, je veux dire, moi, j'ai pas particulièrement à l'esprit
Well, I'm here this year. I don't have a particularly French spirit as such. I don't want to say hip hip hooray French cinema, but for the past 2 years, I think French cinema has been doing rather well. It's in a good state of health. There are very interesting films being made. People often reproach French films and say there's too much talking in them, too much dialogue. They're too chatty. But I actually think that's one of the strengths of French cinema. You're forced to listen to things which perhaps otherwise you wouldn't listen to. There's the power of the images backing up the words. So I think that actually these are rather good years for French cinema. A number of French films have been purchased to make remakes in America, which is actually rather flattering. It'd be even better if they could be distributed directly, would it not? Well, yes, but this is a discussion you'll have to open up with the distributors themselves, will you not?
Madame Deneuve, vous avez fait le tour de nombreux festivals.
Ms. Deneuve, you've been to a number of festivals over the years. What does the Festival of Berlin mean to you, especially? I haven't actually been to so many festivals. It's different than you might imagine. I've been to Cannes a number of times, more or less happily, with more or less pleasure in it. For actors, at least for me anyway, something which I haven't chosen. It's something which one does because one accompanies a film all the way through, right to the end. It's always hard work. I'm glad to be here like this evening rather than having a film in the competition. It's a pretty heavy challenge for actors. You're very exposed in a sense. So I haven't been to as many festivals as you might imagine. Berlin really is one of the major cinema festivals, so I'm rather proud to be with you this evening, actually.
Madame Deneuve, bonjour et mes respects.
À travers vous,
Good
Madame
evening, and I'd like to
Deneuve,
pay
on
you
a
my
rendu
respects.
hommage
Now,
aussi à la femme.
through you, we've
Vous
also
savez
paid tribute
actuellement que la
to
femme, de
woman.
par le monde, elle est brimée, elle est torturée, elle est aussi,
Women are often
elle est aussi
tormented,
violentée, surtout dans certains pays.
are often violated in some countries, men too as well, says Ms. Deneuve, and the gentleman says thank you for reiterating that.
Je vais la poser.
Coming now to the question.
Je vais la poser. Madame Catherine Deneuve, vous êtes aussi connue par vos positions un peu politiques sur
You're
la
also
scène
well known
publique.
for taking a rather political
Pourriez-vous,
stance
par exemple, en
on the
solidarité
public
avec les
stage.
peuples et des
Could you
femmes
perhaps say
qui
something in
actuellement,
solidarity with people who are currently struggling, with
jouer un
women who
rôle,
are
par
currently
exemple,
struggling? Do you
pour
have
la
a
femme
role to
algérienne
play, for
actuellement,
example, for
qui lutte
women
contre
in
la
Algeria currently who are struggling against barbarism? For example, what? What would you be thinking of? For example, I don't know, by acting as an Algerian woman, a character in a film, will you be expressing your solidarity with these women who are struggling for their dignity and for their honour? You're asking me if I would act in a film on that subject. Well, I think that I don't actually have any place in a film acting the character of an Algerian woman. I feel a great deal of compassion and solidarity with women in countries such as Algeria, for example, currently, where there is a very problematic situation. However, I'm very careful. Perhaps you'll think I'm being too prudent, but it's a question of respect as well. Respect towards what I do, towards my own position. I don't think that I should take sides too much in political life. I don't think I should participate in that too much. I don't want to exploit my name and my image for causes where I know that I can't do more than I already do. I'm always rather reluctant, in a sense, to get involved in measures which will not be successful. I mean, if it were just enough for well-known actors and actresses to take part in actions of that ilk, to stop barbarism, the kind of barbarism we see in Algeria and elsewhere as well, well, I mean, that was too rosy a picture of the world if that were all it took. But there was a rather important demonstration in France recently. I took part. I didn't physically go there because I wasn't in France at the time, but I recorded a text for a journalist who, by the way, has been killed in the interim. A priori, I would say no, but, well, I don't know. Perhaps if I read a screenplay where there was a role of a French woman or a European in an Algerian film, that would be fair enough. It would all depend upon the particular circumstances. But I don't think that I would be a politicised, in inverted commas, actress. I'm a citizen, but I'm not a politicised actress. I don't want to exploit my role as an actress for political ends.
Okay. Madame Deneuve,
could you perhaps stand up
and
speak into the microphone, please?
Can you in English, maybe?
Okay. You seem to be one of the most beautiful actresses in the world, and I would like to know if there were times when you wished to be not so beautiful to get better parts, maybe, because you get character parts. I mean, this is also sometimes the disadvantage with real beauty.
Ce que vous dites est vrai d'une façon générale.
Well, on the one hand, what you've said is true. It's true in general terms, but I don't think that that actually directly concerns me. All actresses start very young, and if you start very young, you start in terms of your appearance. That's the starting point for actresses. You can say whatever you like, no matter how talented you are. That will be the case. But I've been fortunate enough to work with directors very early on who gave me strong characters to play. For example, think of the Roman Polanski film. I was 22 then, and that's very young to act a role like that. I was in Tristana as well, and I've played rather young figures, and I've been very fortunate, I think, throughout my career. I've had very varied parts to act. I mean, okay, people look at magazines and at images. They look at the glamour, but I think my career is actually much more varied than the image one might have of me.
Yeah, hello. I'd like to ask another question about glamour. I think that perhaps you're one of the last generation of the big international European stars, and it doesn't seem like there are too many people that followed that came afterwards. And I was just wondering whether you had an opinion of why that is, or do you think that there's still any place for European stars in that same way?
Je pense que le star system, franchement, de toute façon, n'est pas très adapté à l'Europe.
Well, I think that the star system is not too adapted to Europe. It's something which is always very linked to America, very closely associated with an image which could be carefully controlled. American actors live and work in different circumstances. It makes it possible for them to maintain a real private life and to be very protected. They're protected, for example, by studios, by press attachés, by public relations people. That's not at all the case in Europe. And so I think that this star system is not entirely adapted to actresses in Europe. But I think that glamour, though, is something entirely different. It's something which is timeless. Glamour can be Marilyn Monroe, just as well as it could be some new young actress tomorrow. It's of course related to one's appearance, to a style, to fashions in appearance as well. These are things which will develop. A young actress who's found glamorous now might not have been found glamorous 10, 15 years ago. Dustin Hoffman, for example, would not have been thought to be sexy when he was 25, 30. So I think this is something which is striking. That's perhaps more what we have with actresses in this star system.
Tudor Garanfil pour la télévision roumaine et Talon Vulcer. Nous vous fêtons
I come from
ici pour
Romanian
votre carrière.
television. Now you're doing
Que
something
je
here
suis
for your
convaincu,
career
vous
as
ne
well.
l'avez accompli encore.
I'm sure you have not
Vous
yet come to the end
encore,
of your career. I'm sure
très
you have
des grandes
plenty of
surprises. De
surprises
ce
for
point
us
de
up
vue,
your
je
sleeve.
voudrais
Now, from
savoir
that
si
point
vous
of
avez
view,
projeté
I would like to
de
ask,
passer au moins une fois à l'expérience de la mise en scène.
have you ever thought
Et
about
quelles
getting
sont
behind
les
the
qualités
camera
idéales
and
d'un
about
metteur en
directing?
scène
What are the
qui a
ideal
été
qualities of a director?
entre les grands auteurs avec que vous avez travaillé,
Amongst the major figures that
plus
you
proche de
have
ces
worked
qualités?
with, who was the closest to being an ideal director? Well, I don't think that actors and actresses necessarily simply can metamorphose into directors. Some have succeeded in making this switch over very successfully. But I wouldn't really feel that I would be inspired or even sufficiently talented to shoulder all of that responsibility. Think of all the decisions you have to make in creating a film. I have perhaps rather elevated ideas of what directing a film means. It's ongoing choices. It's not just directing, saying, well, stand there with technical assistants who could help me. So I don't really think that that's something for me. The qualities which are required for that are moral qualities, qualities of endurance, qualities of courage, of persistence, pride. And above all, I think that you have to have a universe within yourself which you want to transmit through images, through writing. And that is a very particular mode of expression. I also think you need particular physical qualities to direct currently. You really have to struggle to achieve something in direction these days.
Quel rôle jouent les vêtements dans votre film?
Can you tell us about the role of clothes in your films? I saw The Siren of Mississippi and it said Catherine Deneuve is dressed by Yves Saint Laurent. The clothes are fabulous. Perhaps you could tell us what role clothes play in your films. Well, in some films clothes are very important. People often say that that's not really the crux of the matter. It's very pleasant. Sometimes it's pleasant, of course, to be wearing costumes which one's not used to. That means that you behave differently. It makes it, and you walk differently, and so on. It makes it easier for you to get into the part. That's not so much the case in contemporary films. People don't work with couturier and designers as much as they used to for fairly apparent reasons. Questions of cost, for example. It's always pleasant to wear attractive costumes. Think of the Sirens of Mississippi. The costumes were made specially. That was also the case for Belle du Jour by Deneuve. That was the first time that I worked with Yves Saint Laurent on a film when it came to the costumes. I've made a number of films with him. Because when they're rather particular characters, special figures, it's important that there's also something inventive in the costumes. You can't just have costumes which look like something you might see in just walking down the street. They have to be something special. The Americans have always been absolutely fabulous at doing that. Americans have almost always used special costume designers for films, even for contemporary films. And that helps to create a certain distance, but it also helps to create characters who are not just images from daily life. They're stylized, they're somehow different and distinct, and it's then easier to get into the film.
Quand on vous consacre une rétrospective telle que celle-ci aujourd'hui à
A
Berlin,
retrospective like the one in Berlin has been consecrated to you. Do you really enjoy seeing your old films, or would you rather not? Which of these films, might I ask, would you be delighted to see here? Well, I wouldn't look at the films again. I wouldn't watch them again. I don't do that in general. I'm not trying to flee or escape. It's not that I refuse to watch those films. But it's a question of time. We're all racing against the clock. I already have the impression I don't have time to see all the films I'd like to see. I'm very curious and I love cinema. And I'd never really be willing to give 2 hours to see a film that I've made. I mean, I would be pleased to look at the retrospective, but at the same time, I'm a little bit worried about it, almost frightened. If I'd been staying for long enough, I would like to see one of the films which are screening in competition. I would have preferred that than seeing one of my films. It's nothing to do with modesty or anything like that. Something far from it.
Madame Deneuve.
Il y avait une demande avant. D'accord, allez-y alors, Pilar.
Okay. Madame Deneuve, your career really got to a start with Roman Polanski when you were 22, and that was at a time when a lot of, when women's roles in general were changing, not only in acting but also in our society. And since that time, you, as somebody mentioned, have pretty much evolved in front of the camera and have affected the way a lot of women see themselves, particularly with regard to the more complex roles that you've played. And I'm interested in knowing what, in looking back over that time, what do you think has fundamentally changed for women? For instance, you're part of a group of female actors who, one of the first groups that have been able to play mature, complex roles that have been available out there. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sorry, your question was rather long. I'm not quite sure that I grasped the question which you were asking me.
Your question was so long, I didn't really understand the question.
I'm sorry. Yes, I would just like it if you could talk about how you've seen women's roles in filmmaking change from the time that you've had your career.
Je crois que l'idéal féminin a quand même changé dans la mesure.
Seems to me that the feminine ideal, the ideal of what woman is, has changed vis-à-vis the role of women and their powers in contemporary society is something which has altered. 30 years ago, we saw a great deal more pretty, elegant, ravishing, flirtatious women in films. Nowadays, you see more women who are working, who have responsibilities. I wouldn't say they are stronger women who are shown in current cinema, but certainly superficially they appear stronger. There are parts and characters which are in a sense more masculine, but it's not even quite that though, is it? Women are now acting parts which previously would only have been written for men. I think that anyway, cinema always mirrors society. Women have become increasingly independent in each and every way, in terms of their physical liberty, their sexual liberty, their professional liberty, divorce and so on. And of course, the cinema is going to reflect these developments. And in a sense, I've lived through that myself. I've been fortunate enough to make rather particular films. I played rather special characters, particular characters. I never had the feeling that I was typecast or stuck in a stereotype. Okay, I was a blonde actress, I was fire, I was ice for various people. But it was never absolutely true. And I think I've been very fortunate to have managed to remain like that, to have not represented a particular style of woman.
Just a very short question about, you get the Golden Bear tonight for your lifetime achievement. How do you feel about this? You said before you're very proud to be here, but could you
just explain, how do you feel to get this award tonight?
Comment vous dire
What can I say?
C'est toujours, vous savez, c'est toujours mitigé. Il y a toujours, c'est comme un peu Noël, vous savez.
It's a little
Noël,
bit like
c'est très
Christmas,
agréable
actually.
avant, on y pense, on est très
Christmas is
excité.
great. Beforehand, you think
On sait
about
qu'on
it,
va
you get
avoir
all
quelque chose,
worked
on sait
up. You know
que,
you're going to be getting something.
je sais bien que c'est pas une surprise, que je sais ce que
And this
c'est.
time it
Mais
won't
je
be a
sais qu'après,
surprise. I
il y
know
aura
what
comme,
the present will be.
comme pour les enfants et comme pour les
But it's a bit
adultes,
like children, for grown-ups
très léger
too.
moment de dépression après,
You feel
d'une chose
slightly
qui
depressed
était agréable,
after
quelque chose
something
qui
so
finit.
exciting, something which is so
Je suis encore
agreeable
dans la
and which is then
période,
over.
avant le 24 décembre au
Now I'm
soir,
still in the build-up. It's
et,
not
je
Christmas
souhaite,
Eve yet.
rester jusqu'à
And I hope
jusqu'à ce soir.
that I
Et
stay
comme je
excited
repars
until
demain à
this
Paris,
evening.
je serai plus
As I'm
tard,
leaving for
je pense
Paris
que
tomorrow,
c'est
and I'll be
plus facile de
really
passer cette
busy.
petite
I think it'll
vague-là.
be easier for me to get over
Mais
this slight
c'est
down
un plaisir et en
after
même temps, c'est vrai que c'est difficile de
Christmas.
recevoir
It's a pleasure,
quelque
of
chose
course, but
parce
it's
que
hard
c'est-
to receive
parce
something.
que finalement, les acteurs, enfin les actrices préfèrent, je crois, jouer, faire des films.
I think that
et
actresses
continuer à
prefer
faire des films.
to
Moi, je lis pas
act,
forcément non plus
keep
toutes
on
les
making
critiques, vous savez,
films.
quand les films
I
sont
don't read
faits.
all
Et donc,
reviews of films
j'ai
after
du mal
the
à
films are
m'arrêter, comme on me
shot. It's
demande en
hard
ce
for
moment
me
aujourd'hui,
to
par
stop,
exemple,
as people
de
are asking me now to
regarder,
do,
disons, et de
and
fixer
to
sur,
look at
sur les
myself
films que j'ai
and
faits,
focus
sur
on the
quelque chose
films
qui
which
pour
I've
moi
made,
est
to focus on
quelque
something
chose encore en mouvement aujourd'hui.
which actually is still changing for me currently. Lifetime achievement, I don't know, the difficult term.
Non, c'est-
Yes, Madame, you've made a number of films in English, but lately it seems like you've returned more to the French cinema. Now, obviously, that part of that is because you are in constant demand in France, but I just wondered, is it also because you are not getting the kind of scripts in English that you like, of the kind of sensibility, or is it that you're just more comfortable working in French? Could you comment, please?
Écoutez, je crois que j'aurais beaucoup de plaisir à refaire un film en langue anglaise.
Well,
parce
I'd
que
be
c'est
delighted
toujours
to
un
make
challenge,
another
c'est très
film
difficile de
in English.
faire
It's always a
une autre
challenge.
langue.
It's very hard
Et,
to
ça
make
m'est arrivé
films
plusieurs
in a
fois, ça
language
m'était
which is not
vraiment,
your
c'était
own.
quelque chose
I've done
qui
that a number of
plaisait
times,
énormément, mais
and I
c'est
really
vrai que
enjoyed it very
les scripts
much.
qu'on m'a proposés
It's
depuis
true, though, that the
Indochine, quand j'étais aux
scripts that
États-Unis
have
pour
been
le
put to
film
me
avec
since
l'Oscar,
Indochina,
c'est vrai que j'ai eu des propositions,
when
mais
the
que ces
film won the
rôles ne m'ont
Oscar,
pas
I mean,
semblé,
I have been offered
assez
various
forts,
parts,
assez
but the
intéressants.
parts didn't seem
Et je
strong
n'ai-
enough and interesting
enfin,
enough
je
to
n'ai pas
me.
assez envie d'être dans un film de langue anglaise
I'm
pour
not keen enough
accepter
to
de jouer
be
un
in an
personnage
English
qui
language
paraît
film
trop
to
conventionnel.
accept
Donc je préfère,
acting a too
je préfère
conventional
continuer à faire des choses
part,
qui
so
paraissent
I would
plus originales en Europe.
rather continue to work in Europe, do things which are more original and innovative.
Madame Deneuve, I like to sit down this time because my camera doesn't see you while I'm standing, so I have to sit here. I would like to know, you never played an explicit love scenes, as far as I know, in your films. What was the reason for that?
An explicit?
Love scenes. You never see yourself. We never see yourself on like other actresses do.
Écoutez, j'ai tourné des scènes d'amour dans des films.
Well, I have actually. There have been love scenes in the films I made.
J'ai tourné des scènes d'amour dans les films. Je vois pas très bien ce que vous voulez dire.
I'm not quite sure what you're getting at.
Decent. It's not explicit.
Je ne trouve pas que Belle de jour soit un film si décent que ça.
I don't think that the film
but
Belle de Jour
after
is
that-
so very
after
decent,
that-
actually.
J'ai tourné une scène d'amour dans un film d'André Téchinet.
Well, in
Vous l'avez peut-être pas
one
vu,
of
il
André
s'appelle
Téchinet's
Le Lieu du
films, I
J'ai
did shoot a love
tourné
screen.
une scène
It
qui
was
n'est pas
called
très
Les Lieux du
explicite, mais
Crime,
avec une
and
femme.
there was another one which wasn't very explicit, but it was with a
Dans un
woman.
film d'André Téchinet il y a 2 ans.
In another film by Téchinet 2
Mais
years
il faut
ago,
reconnaître que par goût,
I
c'est
must
vrai, je n'ai
admit
pas une
that
très grande attirance pour la
I'm not
nudité au cinéma, oui. C'est vrai que
terribly much in favour. I don't have too much of a taste for nakedness, nudity in cinema. I don't think that's very erotic, and I'm attracted more by eroticism in cinema than by simple, straightforward nakedness.
You said that you like to go to a lot of movies. You don't have a lot of time to see your old films because you're so busy going to movies. How many movies do you see a week or a month, roughly? And are there any favorites you've seen lately, or any favorite actors or actresses you have? And the last question: is there any movies you've seen lately that you would like to have been in yourself?
Oh là là. Alors,
Oh dear, oh dear.
je peux pas vous faire de bilan du nombre de films que je vois par semaine.
Well, I can't really add up the number of films I see every week. Sometimes I'm working, and then I never have the chance to go to the movies. Some weeks I go twice. But I do see quite a lot of films. I realised when I vote for the César in France that I've actually seen most of the films that we're supposed to vote on, which isn't the case for everyone voting. When it comes to the films I would have liked to have had a chance to act in that I've seen recently.
Ah oui,
What parts might you have liked to act? Well, I found Breaking the Waves very moving. That's a great female character, and it's one of the best films I've seen this year.
Madame, avant vous avez dit que
Earlier,
vous n'êtes pas une actrice politisée.
you said that you're not a politicized actress, but you're a citizen. Why is that? Well, why not?
Ça va pas ensemble, le cinéma et la politique.
Well, don't you think that cinema and politics go hand in hand? Well, no, that's not the same. There are political films, and then there's cinema. I said I'm not a politicized, in quotation marks, actress. I didn't want to use the fact that I'm very well known and to exploit that for political ends. But as a citizen, I do think that I have acted, I've taken part in various measures. I've used the fact that I'm well known, inasmuch as I as a citizen was concerned and I wanted to react to events. But I wouldn't do, I don't know, I wouldn't support a campaign for a politician. Politicians are often good actors, by the way. Well, I don't quite agree there.
Madame Deneuve, pourquoi est-ce que vous avez refusé l'invitation du président de la République fédérale?
Why did you refuse an invitation from the President of Germany? Mr. Hadlin says she didn't. Mr. Hadlin, are you unhappy? What are you unhappy about? Here she is. What did you say I'm refusing? An invitation from the President? No, I didn't, not at all. There seems to be a misunderstanding. If other people think this, it's better to get things cleared up. No, I'm here for scarcely 48 hours. And the 2 days that I'm here, I'm extremely busy. I've got a very full program. I had to make a choice, and I left it up to the people from the film festival to decide. And I can reassure you as well that the President understood entirely. And by the way, I think that coming to a festival, I've been to festivals abroad before, and in general, I tend to meet journalists, I go to cinemas, I see movies, I talk to people from the world of cinema. I would have loved to stay in Berlin for longer, but unfortunately I can't. I would love to see a bit more of Berlin. But I don't think that the festival is necessarily the best time to keep a bit of one's own private life and to see Berlin in peace. You have to come back in the summer. Yeah, I'll come back in summer.
On a parlé jusqu'à présent de l'actrice, évidemment.
Up until now, we've talked about you as an actress, as a citizen. We haven't talked about you at all as a businesswoman. You're also a businesswoman. Well, no, I'm not really a businesswoman, but there have been rumours recently. Some people have said your business is not going too well. You say no. Could you tell us a bit about this? Which paper are you from? Messaggero, an Italian paper. Why? Well, given that you're the only one asking this kind of question, I would quite like to know which paper you're from. You come from the Messaggero. You know that I put in an appeal against an article in a French paper. I replied in an article to these criticisms, and this article was picked up by papers abroad in the UK and in Italy. The original article was picked up by the UK and by Italy, and I then replied to the initial article, which was written by the head of my company, who's since resigned. We bought up his share. I don't really think that I need to go into all the details now. It was all explained in the declaration that was made. That was given. There was a declaration given to the Italian press agency, and there will be a reply published in the paper which published the original article. The original article appeared about 2 weeks ago, so we'll have the response coming soon. I think this is a subsidiary issue. I'm first and foremost an actress. Business comes second, and I think that's perhaps why some people were a bit unhappy, and that's why we got rid of this member of the firm.
Madame Deneuve, is this over here on the right side? On what? Oh. Is it true that you've been approached by Mr. Peter Hunt in 1968 to play the leading part in the 6th James Bond film on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which was taken by Diana Rigg, and why did you refuse it?
No.
You never got the offer.
Je n'ai jamais eu cette proposition.
No,
okay,
that offer was never made to me.
Ah oui, vous savez, c'est comme dans les journaux.
Well, you know, it's like newspapers. They print any old thing.
Hello, Me again. I just a follow-up to my last question. Could you compare working with Depardieu Senior and Junior? Or is that too much to ask?
No, it's not too much. It's just that they have nothing in common. I mean, they look alike. Ils se ressemblent pas mal, c'est vrai. Mais ils sont très, très différents.
They do indeed look alike, but they're very different. I think Gérard's childhood was a lot more difficult than that of Guillaume. So he was a rather strong figure. By the time that he arrived in the cinema, he had a rather hard adolescence, whereas Guillaume was rather protected, and he's rather more fragile young man. Microphone, please.
De travailler. C'est un acteur que j'aime beaucoup. C'est un acteur très généreux.
I like working with him. He's a very generous actor. He's very present when he's involved in the film. Some people say too present, but he's very generous with those he's working with. Someone who is really well loved by actors and actresses. He has a very energizing, dynamic presence. Microphone, please. Microphone.
And what do you think of his presence in French cinema, that he's really, for English language people, the only really famous French actor that would make a movie travel internationally, and the power he has within France?
Qu'est-ce que je pense de son pouvoir?
Oui, internationally as well as in France.
Écoutez, je vais vous dire, j'ai pas vu en dehors de Green Card, je n'ai pas vu beaucoup de films de Gérard
apart
en
from
langue anglaise.
Green Card, I haven't seen many of Gérard's English language films. I can't really give you an opinion. I'm very familiar with his French films, but not with his English language ones. I know that he shot recently something in English for the TV. I hope that he's still going for quality and that he's still trying to be original, and that he's going the same way as he did with French cinema, but I'm not well familiar with the English language films by Gérard.
Bonjour. Lors de cet hommage, j'ai découvert vos films avec Jacques
In this
Demy,
homage, I discovered your films with Jacques Demy, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and The Young Girls of Rochefort. Well, interesting. These are films which are 30 years old. You say you discovered them. Just a joke. So anyway, I really like these films. I think they're exceptional films. The set, the dance sequences, the songs. And my first question is, you say that you don't look at your films anymore, but what kind of impression do you have about these films, these two films? And how did Jacques Demy guide you in the making of them? Well, Jacques Demy was the most important director, if I may be frank, in my life as an actress, and in my life in general. I met him when I was very young. He wanted to work with me when I'd made just one film. I wasn't sure I was going to even stay in cinema. He looked at me, he spoke to me differently. It was like a revelation, shooting The Umbrellas of Cherbourg with him. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg and The Young Girls of Rochefort are the films that I've seen the most of, since they're rather special. They're musicals, and you often see excerpts of them. They're also particularly happy films, lively films, even if the backdrop is unhappy. And I very much like the music of The Young Girls of Rochefort. That's something which makes me rather happy, and Jacques Demy was certainly one of the filmmakers who was most important for me. And even if these films had not been so successful, I mean, my meeting with him is something which was absolutely of the essence for me.
Yes, I also wanted to ask about the Jacques Demy films. I saw Umbrellas of Cherbourg. I think it was the first French film I ever saw in my life in French class. And you'll always be identified for me with that film. And I was curious, he took away a little bit of my question, but I was interested in knowing what it was like working with Jacques Demy. And also, did you sing your own voice for those?
Non, je pense que je vais vous décevoir, mais j'étais doublée.
No, sorry to disappoint you, but it was dubbed. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg was something very special. It was very hard, actually, to get it going. The producer had a lot of trouble in getting it up and running. The whole film was in song, and it wasn't possible for the actors to sing. The music is very hard to sing. The music was all recorded before the shot, and we did the whole thing in dubbing, a kind of lip-sync effect. We did it as a sort of playback. It was a playback. It wasn't synchronization. It was a playback. So it was very hard in technical terms, especially for the director, Jacques Demy. The music was recorded, and so he had to think about all of the timing when he moved the cameras and the actors around a particular set, which was of course extremely complicated. I mean, it's not like an opera where you can move around from the right to the left. In the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, there's real genuine direction, and that is something which was also affected by the timing of the music, which had been recorded before. Furthermore, it was hard to get the actors to be perfectly in time, so while you were shooting you had to make sure we were absolutely in time, because otherwise we couldn't repair the damage if something went wrong. So it was a quite extraordinary experience for me.
Pardon?
Microphone, please.
Non, c'est ce que je vous disais. C'est une musique qui est
No, what I was saying is that the music is very hard to sing. Music by Michel Legrand in the Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Everybody who sings in the film, they were all professional singers. It wasn't the actors.
Madame Deneuve, your fame and beauty has reached even the little island where I live, Cyprus. My question is this. Being a famous woman, has this affected your private life, your friendships, your family life? And are you afraid of time and changes that time brings?
Oh oui, tout ça c'est vrai.
Yes, all true. It has certainly impinged upon my private life because, of course, no matter what you do, everything has an effect on you. It's affected my family life. I think my children, as children often think actually, thinking about working mothers, they thought I could have been there a bit more. It's often the case with working mothers. If it's affected my friendships, well, no. My closest friends are people who are not at all involved with cinema. So I've had the same friends for a very long time. And of course, your career, your life, of course it will influence what you are and what you do. That seems to me to be entirely logical. You don't just think you can go through life impermeable, not affected without there being any overlap, interference. Those interferences are not always positive either. But I think that's the same for each and every one of us, is it not? Microphone, please.
Non, j'ai pas peur du temps.
No, I'm not afraid of time. I'm afraid of a lack of time. Time passing by isn't agreeable for any of us. But I think it's a question more of energy than anything else. I come from a Latin background, so I'm a bit fatalistic.
Catherine, vous disiez que vous n'êtes pas prête à vous engager pour derrière l'image d'un homme politique.
That you're not willing to back up a politician. You're not here just to talk to people about cinema.
Vous êtes la première dame du cinéma français.
But you are the first lady of French cinema. No, I don't think that I'm the first lady of French cinema. People think you are.
En tout cas, dans l'esprit.
But certainly, those who go to your films think that you are the first lady of French cinema. Perhaps it's not your idea, but it's their conception of you. Now, I would like to know, given this notion which people have of you, do you feel worried? Do you feel responsible? Do you feel responsible towards young French cinema, which has trouble crossing the borders of France? No, I'm not so worried about young French cinema, actually. I really do think that young French filmmakers are pretty good at sticking up for their rights. It's a problem more of distribution. Perhaps as things change in Europe, things will change. Things will have to change, I think, when it comes to trade in cinema, and yet still trying to maintain one's cultural identity whilst also sharing and exchanging. I think we'll need to tackle and learn things differently. To reply to your idea that people think that I'm the first lady of French cinema, well, it is true that this is a term which frightens me a little. I think that I'm a girl, just like I think that actors are boys. And I think that we don't need to stipulate exactly what's going on in social terms. Boys, girls, not these big figures. Microphone, please. Microphone, please.
Oui.
Sorry, the speaker isn't using a microphone.
l'exception culturelle qui est un grand débat qui a été
The
défendu
cultural exception is a major debate. This was defended by France first and foremost. The Americans are trying to circumvent France and to come up with another scenario where the French would be left out. I wonder whether you'd be willing to get involved in this kind of struggle. It's not straightforward. Would you be willing to do something? Well, yes. I'm glad that we have someone here to keep everything in order. But I think if that needs to be done, yes, I would do it. But it's more than just a political question. In that case, it's a question simply of the survival of cinema. So sure, I would be willing to get involved there. A few moments ago, you said that at a festival like this in Berlin, you prefer to see films which are screening in competition rather than seeing films which you acted in yourself. And you've seen one of the films screening in competition in Berlin. I saw you coming out of On connaît la chanson in France one day. Well, you're right, I don't go to private screenings. I go to standard movie theatres with the audience. Right in the middle. Well, yes, but you know, you have to find a seat anyway. Anyway, I saw you after the film and I had the impression that you liked it very much. Yes, I did. I really liked that film, The Same Old Song. I was very happy about that. I really liked the film, The Same Old Song. And when I came out, it really seemed to me that, I don't know, I was very lively. I really enjoyed the film. Thank you. In solidarity with Alain René, that question was.
Encore 5 minutes, alors ça fait 5 questions.
5 minutes more.
Oui.
Madame Deneuve, encore une question.
Mr. Deneuve, one more question.
Vous n'allez pas rester longtemps, certainement.
You're not going to be staying for long, as you said. Have you had a chance to take a look at the festival? There's something which I think is a shame. A festival which doesn't have Arab films or African films. You're forgetting about part of the world if that's what happens. What do you think about that? Well, when I arrived yesterday, I hadn't had a chance to look at the programme of the Berlin Film Festival. I haven't seen the selection. I think that perhaps you shouldn't be asking me. You should perhaps ask Mr. de Hadeln. Well, yes, that's a shame and it's serious, but it's not we who refuse films from Africa or from Arab countries. The problem is rather that there should be more of them. More of them should be produced. You know, in Africa, for example, they produce 3 films a year. And that's it. But that's another discussion. But it's certainly not bad will on our part. Well, we'll talk about this another time if you think that wasn't a sufficient answer. We were talking about young French cinema. I don't want to force you to spill any secrets, but could you tell us about the film of Léos Carax? We're very curious, at least the cast. Please, don't leave us on tenterhooks. Could you tell us a little bit? Well, I'm sorry about leaving you on tenterhooks, but there's Guillaume Depardieu, and there's Mima. The others are young actors, unknown actors who are in the film. So unfortunately, I can't really give you much of an answer. The film doesn't have a title yet. You know, we're still going to be shooting for, I think it's a month more. The film might change quite a lot. It's called Paula X, but I don't know if that's what the title will be when it comes out.
One of the descriptions that has attached to you over the years has been the Ice Maiden. I wonder what you think of that description, and would you like to nail it on the head once and for all?
Non, parce que je vais vous dire d'une certaine façon, je crois que ça m'a... Je m'en suis compte très tard. Au début, ça m'a
I realised this quite late on. At first, it hurt me. I felt it as a constraint and something which was a little negative. And then little by little, as time went by, I realised that in a sense it was quite true. And that quite rather suited me. It avoided something which I would have had trouble putting up with. I didn't have to have too much of a familiar way of dealing with people that I didn't know. Okay, I can be nice to people who I meet, but immediate intimacy is not part of my character. So I think that was, in a sense, spot on, quite correct, and I've learnt to live with it. I'm reserved rather than cold, but something of that ilk is there nonetheless. So I must say, It's not entirely false.
Microphone ici, s'il vous plaît. Non, non, d'abord ici. J'avais demandé, puis après, je vous donnerai la parole tout de suite.
You've acted with an awful lot of people and been directed by a lot of people. Is there anybody that you would like to work with in the future that you haven't worked with in the past?
Beaucoup. Heureusement, c'est bien ça qui me donne l'impression
Heaps of people. Lots and lots of them.
Oui, que je suis toujours comme ça en mouvement.
And that's why I think that things are still in movement, changing. There's a lot of filmmakers I'm interested in. There's lots that I won't ever work with. Some of those who I admire work with actors and actresses in their own country, in their own language. Bergman, for example, except for once, he never worked with foreign actors. But, you know, it's part of one's dreams. You don't have to put all of your dreams into practice.
The German films have gained almost 20% of the domestic market by making more films that are closer to Hollywood films, and their market share is doubling for German films. Is this a trend that you find discouraging, or is this something you disapprove of, or do you see it as a good thing to make more Hollywood-like films here in Europe?
Qu'on a tendance à faire des films pour la consommation américaine, c'est ça?
This idea of films for the American audience? No, it's rather the style, the genre the gentleman was asking about. Well, I think it's actually rather regrettable. I think it would be a shame if Europeans were to start making films for a potential European market, which is, however, used to a rather American diet. France, Germany, everybody must resist the pressure. It can't be that hard, after all, I would say, because these are all countries which have their own identity in terms of the cinema, a very strong identity. This is something which exists. It's not something we have to dream up. We have to preserve it. Are you clapping because it's over, or what? Thank you.
Merci bien de se noter.